There are a few concepts in psychology and mental health that every single person needs to know. And what we are going to be diving in today is absolutely one of them.
To add to what Bianca said, if you could take one page out of all the theories that we have where you can apply them in your life, I would literally just give you this one and say, go apply this, and you'd be set for life.
Hey, everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia. We're so excited to bring you today's episode. Everything and some nuances and some bonuses around polyvagal theory, the key to well-being. And I was just sharing with Bianca before we started this episode, I'm very excited. And for everyone that's joining us today, we are going to bring a blend of science and artistry to today's episode. And that's my intention, so that by the time that you are done listening to this episode, and Bianca, for us as well, we have perhaps a different perspective on ourselves, perhaps a different perspective on relating to others, and perhaps a different perspective that we can have on our brains and how we are so freaking incredible just as we are. So I want to start by sharing a story like I had mentioned to you. So this past weekend, I believe, it was this weekend, I was on the phone with my grandmother. And this grandmother is on my father's side. We refer to her as Nana. And I was having a conversation with her and my aunt, whom was with her at the time. And we were catching up, talking, all things. And one of my favorite things when she and I connect, and she's, mind you, in her 80s, late 80s now, she is sharp as a tack. And Bianca, we were talking about, whenever we do connect, we were talking, or we get to the subject of theory and of books and of learning and of her research. So now this woman, I think I've shared with you before and might have shared on this podcast, she is a living, breathing library, thesaurus, I might dare to say. And shout out to you, Nana, if you're watching this. She is a force to be reckoned with. And why I say that is because she is someone who not only has she been a opera singer, she has had a profound impact on so many people's lives, given the research that she has done through her Mommy and Me singing classes, which she has hosted for decades at this point. And why I bring this into this episode is because I have sitting in front of me some of her research that she was doing and reporting to local newspapers and local organizations and research studies, which was a plea for families and parents in particular to pay attention to what we now know, which is the polyvagal nerve, and to pay attention to how we as human beings relate. And the way in which she was describing it was from the standpoint of learning about this vagus nerve, although she didn't refer to it at the time as such, as the pathway for the most powerful connection that could be readily available, literally through one note away of connecting with your toddler and with your child. So we're going to break down why that's relevant, why that matters. And I literally have a couple of materials that I want to share for our listeners and with you, Bianca, because what is polyvagal theory? Where did it come from? Why should we care about it? And in particular for our listeners, as two experienced clinicians, Bianca, sitting behind the scenes with individuals, helping them actually improve their brain health, improve their relationships, improve their overall well-being. This is one tool applied through different practices that you and I use day in, day out with individuals, day in, day out with teams, day in, day out with business owners, and day in, day out with ourselves. So like I said at the very beginning, it is, if I could give you one thing, like pull out all the pages of the theories that are in psychology and are in neuroscience and et cetera, well-being. This is one that if you don't have this in your tool belt, my goodness, I am so sorry that no one's ever shared this with you. So let us do that. So what is polyvagal theory? Bianca, do you want to kind of share, or should I just slide right in there.
Just hammer it. But I want to
Okay.
say, go Nana. Oh my
Yeah.
God. What a powerhouse of a woman.
Literally. I have to the left of me, and I'll share just for the video watchers. We have 1996 papers here, excerpts from Your Child's Brain on Newsweek. We have a Sufi purification breathwork recommended by the Kripalu Yoga Center, which is very well known, especially today. And then we also have 1985, literally on a typewriter, research here that goes into the depths of, at the time, what they knew. So for anyone that is just introducing or dipping their toes, or this is something that you maybe heard of before, but you haven't really gotten into a little bit deeper into what it is. So polyvagal theory is a theory that has been developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. And I have to the right of me many different books that I am going to recommend for anyone that wants to get a little bit deeper into this, but primarily this book, which is Polyvagal Safety. So this is directly written by Stephen Porges, a little bit more on the clinical side. So this isn't your average, like, go, drive and read this book. This one's definitely a sit down. But why I mention that is because it really talks about on the clinical side of things. And there's two key players that I'll mention as we talk about polyvagal theory. So it's Dr. Stephen Porges, and it is Deb Dana. We're going to give her a huge shout out because she is the essentially bridge that allowed Stephen Porges' work in the research labs to transfer over into actual clinical practice when it comes to the application of polyvagal theory. And so polyvagal theory, in a nutshell, essentially explains how the autonomic nervous system responds to our stress and promotes different states of social connection through a hierarchical system that essentially responding to social engagement, immobilization, or mobilization. Essentially how we connect, how we get activated, or how we kind of sit back in our chairs and kind of just hang back and perhaps collapse. So if you've ever heard the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all of those quote unquote stress responses are a byproduct of the autonomic nervous system, which is essentially responsible for your rest, your digest, and the automatic systems that operate your entire body and your nervous system. Bianca, is there anything that you would add to that initial paintbrush? Okay. So I just want to give a little bit of a historical context for anyone that loves that kind of history chapter. And I think it's important too, also for the context of what we're weaving together in that artistry way. So this was research and work that was done in the 1970s and 1980s. So just in terms of the timeline that we have here, now we're in 2025. So it's been quite a hot minute, or for my wicked fans out there, a clock tick, since this has been brought not only outside of the literature in the term when he was a professor of psychiatry, to now the actual clinical application of this. So cool, Emilia, why does this matter? Well, at the end of the day, how fast your heartbeat is going, how well attuned you are in your relationships, and how your digestive system is working. So aka how you're living throughout your day-to-day is directly influenced by what is your 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve that runs throughout your entire body and is responsible for all of these automatic things that happen every single day. It's there. We take advantage of it without even realizing, because it is what allows us to exist and do what humans do best, which is connect to other people. So we have, and we've talked about on this platform, Bianca, how human beings have this fundamentary basic need of belonging and connection, right? Now, picture the vagus nerve as the gateway for connection to happen. In the literature, if our vagus nerve is nourished from a very young age, this is insert Nana's work here, related to your child's brain. So let's say, for example, you're a parent and you have a newborn and you have a child, and you do, quote unquote, some of the basic things that people teach you, right? You read to your kid at night, you turn to them when they tug your sleeve, or you literally meet their basic needs from a social bonding standpoint. Now, what the research has shown is that when you read to your child, when you actually sing with them, when you incorporate music and play into their development, they have what's called a higher attunement and a higher emotional intelligence, and thereby a higher degree and statistical probability of having meaningful, highly attuned relationships. When children enter into this world and they have caregivers that are not attuned and that are not connecting with them through reading, basic reading, right, at night, through music, through play, what that does is essentially starts to quote unquote, form or shape or not develop that vagus nerve that essentially is responsible for the heartbeat, for the attachment within our social bonding structure, within our brain development. And so over time, the polyvagal theory showcases that over time, if that is not within your developmental experience, studies show that you will have higher rates of difficulty when it comes to connecting and high quality relationships. You will have higher rates and predisposition, thank you, to chronic illnesses, to fatigue, to so many different not so happy-go-lucky experiences. And a lot of this ties back to, again, what we know as the vagus nerve. So how your attachments are laid down, right? Whether you're anxious, avoidant, whether you're disorganized, or whether you're secure. The system that's the sneaky behind the scenes, you can't really see because it's inside of you, helping everything from your heartbeat to your digestive tract to your brain development, is the vagus nerve. And so I absolutely geek out at this. And one way you can think about this is your safety radar. Your vagus nerve is responsible for safety in relationships, in your environment, etc. It's the thing that essentially kicks into gear if you're walking late at night and all of a sudden you see something rustling in the shadows or in the bushes next to you. And so Deb Dana, as I had mentioned, was a clinician who partnered and still to this day collaborates with Dr. Stephen Porges and his work as they bring polyvagal through the Polyvagal Institutes. I have some links that are going to be in the show notes for anyone that's interested going deeper. But her work is now where we bridge over into the day-to-day. Okay, how do you take this study, these researchers, all of this data that helps us really understand how powerful this system is, and how do you actually apply that into day-to-day living, into day-to-day well-being? And that's where I want to read this quote that I had for us, which is, I just lost my page. And this is in, for anyone, I'm going to flash another book. This is in Anchored by Deb Dana. The beauty of a living thing is not the atoms that go into it, but the way those atoms are put together. That's by Carl Sagan from the Cosmos, episode 5. Why I mention that is because at the end of the day, per what I just said, the atoms that make up who we are, it's how those are put together or how they weren't put together through our developmental needs being met. So Bianca, I know that as a practicing clinician, this is something that has entered into your world. I know that you and I have done some work in this area and will continue to share our findings and our work. And this has been something that we have also brought into group coaching. It has been something that we've had breathed into every single setting that we possibly can, because at the end of the day, the more awareness that we have to our own state, to our own vagus nerve and how it operates within our day-to-day, and the practices like the mindfulness movement that has taken off, the more we have awareness to it, the more we feel as though we have control, and thereby the more belief we have to actually implementing some of these really small and seemingly insignificant things into our day-to-day. And so talk to me from a cognitive behavioral therapy standpoint as it pertains to how the moving the body and changing the body behavioral activation, how that impacts our thoughts, our perception, our beliefs. Talk to me about what have you found to be one of the most interesting things about polyvagal theory, be it in your own personal practice, be it in your clients, working with clients. Yeah, what are your thoughts around polyvagal theory, and why do you think that it is a key for well-being?
You know what's fascinating? In my entire 6 years of post high school education, so in order to get my degree and my license as a mental health counselor, I never once learned about polyvagal theory. And if I did, it was in passing. For anyone who didn't see what Emilia just said, you got to go on YouTube because she whispered it. She said it's effing wild. I never learned about it. I never heard about it. We never talked about it. I never knew what it was until I met you, and you actually brought it up. And then through learning from you and the work you and I have done together behind the scenes, and then through my own research, I've tried tying it in with CBT, and you just see how clearly it is tied together. Polyvagal theory is the entire state of your nervous system. It's how your body literally operates and how your brain and your body go hand in hand with one another. It's why the concept, the body keeps the score, is so prevalent, because these memories and these beliefs and these experiences and the relationships you have and the way you relate to others and the way you see yourself, the world, and others is completely tied in with the state of your nervous system. And if your nervous system is constantly deregulated or dysregulated, constantly in a fight or flight or a shutdown state, how are you going to function properly? How can you have a really wonderful, full, healthy, productive, adaptive life? You literally can't. I mean, think of a child who's in a home where those things are not happening, where their parents are not emotionally attuning to them, where there's harm or discord, the child doesn't feel safe for whatever reason. That child, literally, their brain doesn't develop properly. It can lead to severe mental health issues. It can lead to severe medical health issues. Gabor Mate's work is really starting to highlight this, about how much the body is severely impacted by the experiences that we go through, so much so it can lead to Alzheimer's, to cancer, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, these really, really scary, fearful things that we as humans are trying to run away from. These can all be prevented if you have a safe, grounded, regulated nervous system. But nobody talks about it. Do you think you and me, our parents didn't know this? Your grandmother did. Your parents didn't, which is wild.
I want to share this with you. She and I go back to this all the time, because when she was researching at the time as she is definitely a scientist and she's a musician at heart. But I want to share this with you at that time because she said, and seared into her memory and her body at this point. She said, at the time, everyone laughed at me because I used to literally advocate, and I would put things out in the newspaper. I would pass it around schools, certain organizations and colleges and universities would be the only places where they actually took me seriously. But everyone else would laugh at me and tell me that these mommy and me classes were stupid, that this research that literally talked about neonatal development in music and attunement helps to regulate a baby's nervous system, people laughed at her. And that was back in the 1980s when polyvagal theory was going on, 1980s, and her research started to come out in 1996, and some of this was documented in 1985. So to that end, Bianca, it's wild, and also to connect it back, that you can go into deep universities and yet something that literally connects the body and the brain and the digestive system isn't talked about, which just showcases how much separation there has been from our brain, from our bodies, and how we're severed at the head. And Dr. Stephen Porges talks about this too. Like, we very much live in a society where we're not necessarily going towards our bodies for clues about what's going on. We're just trying to make a story from our head. And in CBT, that is something that is extremely helpful, which is called top-down processing. We've talked about this many times, but there's also another way to understand so much of the world, and that's called bottom-up processing, which is from your body, and your body informs you so much. And this is where polyvagal theory is such a key.
This is why CBT gets such a bad rap, because a lot of practitioners and a lot of practitioners are just very, 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 very head heavy.
Yeah.
And if you understand CBT, it's cognitive, meaning the mind and the emotions, and behavioral. So you have to take a biopsychosocial model, meaning biology, including the nervous system, psycho, which is psychology and the mind, and then social, and how those are all interwoven. You can't just look at why does someone think the way that they do. You have to look at what's happening in their body when they think the way that they do. What's happening in their body that's maybe causing them to think the way that they are, and vice versa. You have to be way more well-rounded. This is why, I had a professor in college. I wanted to smack him. He said, he's like, anyone who tries to tell you that you need more than CBT, they're just Fruit Loops. He's like, you only need CBT. I'm like, that's why your gut hangs out more than your pregnant wife. Like, woof. Don't at me, bro. It's just ignorance. It's ignorance. Yeah. And people pushing narratives like that is why things like polyvagal theory are considered woo-woo.
Yeah.
It's very like, people just try to be super logical about stuff. It's not logical. It's neural.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, and we're not here to like convince anyone of anything. I think, it's the data is, it's well documented, and even to the neurocardiology component of this, understanding how connected everything really is, showcases how you've overcome such ignorance. The construct that is here, and Stephen Porges talks about this, if you were to do any lick of research, it is very much, yes, a theory, but the science proves that theory to be true. And then the clinical practice of mindfulness and the different ways in which you can practice activating your vagus nerve is the actual setting where you engage something that already exists within you, that is connected to your breath, your respiratory system, your digestive system, your neural centers that allow you to reorganize and redevelop what safety means to you. And I think that from a standpoint of especially trauma and trauma recovery, and anyone that wants to live a life of holistic well-being and actually do that, it is why so many people will get into a mindfulness-based movement and have immediate results. All of a sudden, their stress are going down. If you were to measure before and after, if we were to do, for example, this Sufi purification breath. My goodness, my tongue is tied here. If I were to just read this and I were to measure everyone that's listening to this, even you and I's, our heart rate variability, or even just our heart rate, right? That's one biometric that is influenced, right, by and through and with our vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, controls our respiratory breath. So when we do breath work or we do different breathing patterns, it influences our perception of safety, our perception of social connection, our perception of belonging. It influences everything. And so if I were to have us do a Sufi purification breath, the biomarkers would show that we are in a better state with lower stress, with a lower heart rate, a calmer nervous system after just a very simple breathing pattern like that. And the perception that we would have after implementing something like that would all of a sudden open up our eyes to a little bit of a different experience than where we're at. And I think whether it be breathwork or whether it be movement or whether it be, yoga is so popular in this aspect for a reason, for multiple reasons. And what I think is so exciting about this is it helps us all when we understand that there's a plethora of different ways that we can engage our vagus nerve. It helps us understand how capable we are without having to really do anything. And Bianca, I know for clients, applying polyvagal practices in just breath work, not having to go out and do anything or buy anything or literally just sit and breathe, change your breathing patterns. Like, it helps to restore how much, and this is the other quote that I wanted to share, is we all have a better guide in ourselves if we would attend to it than any other person can be. We can recognize, that's from Jane Austen. We recognize how much self-leadership and how much accessibility we have to our own self-leadership is genuinely readily available to us when we understand our nervous system and how she or he or they work.
So
it's amazing.
Let's dive into the 3 pillars of the vagus nerve and then some steps that people can do and take to help them climb the vagus ladder.
Beautiful. Okay. So you mentioned the vagus ladder. So this, in polyvagal theory, what is very much referred to when you are researching or talking about it or visualizing it, it's a helpful application, is what's referred to and known as the vagal ladder. So anyone that is listening to this, you can picture a ladder that has 3 rungs on it. Okay. And Polyvagal Practices, this book has a lot of really great visuals. I'll try to kind of flip one for anyone that's watching. But
Emilia's got books for days.
I got books for days. I prep for this because I really I think it's so powerful. The ladder, it has 3 rungs. Okay. And yeah, here it is. The first rung, picture the one at the very top. Okay. I'm going to show. All right. So for anyone that's listening, go to YouTube, watch that. It's called the autonomic ladder. And at the very top, you have the top rung. It's called your ventral vagal state. Now, this is a state that is where connection is more apt to occur. If you have been listening to this podcast, or if you have joined Out of the Mud events, or if you've been a part of group coaching, if we were to ask, what is your state? Green, yellow, red. This is your green state. This is where you are ready for connection. You are available for all of that bonding and social engagement systems that is activating different parts of your brain. Why? Because in a ventral vagal state, you are feeling safe, you are feeling calm, you're feeling connected. That's like the best 3 C's that, or 2 C's and 1 S, that creates this sense of connection. And you know it if you have that friend that you just adore talking to. You just lose track of time. Flow often can be activated more often than not in this ventral vagal state as well. But whole nother research conversation. But anyways, your vagal ladder, the top of that vagal ladder, which is what we all aspire, we say, when we want peace or when we want tranquility or we want to live a healthy, long life, right? a lot of the times we're actively saying from a polyvagal standpoint, we want to be in ventral vagal. In other words, you might have heard in this podcast episode, we have, not in this episode, but other ones, lobster vagal state, which is a joking way to kind of refer to the polyvagal ladder. So that's your green. That's your green state, right? Things are flowing. That's just the best time of your lives. We often have our most favorite memories when we were in a ventral vagal state. So now let's go down the ladder. So this is the middle rung of the ladder. This is what's called your sympathetic, or in other words, also mobilization state. This is what is referred to in the color language as your yellow state. So in a yellow state, what is happening and what is different than the green state or the red state? This is where your fight or flight is kicked in. In other words, your autonomic nervous system is getting you ready and is in a reactive level of response such that you have some degree of a perceived threat and you're mobilized. Your body's ready to go, either fight, flight, do something, because it's scanning unconsciously. You're always scanning for safety. And that is what is happening in that state is you have an increase of heart rate. There are, for lack of better words, a plethora of hormones that are essentially telling you, get ready, because you might need to escape danger. So this, in our day-to-day, in our modern age, it might not be running around in the woods. It is more so you getting ready for a presentation. Like, for example, I had a client recently, Bianca was like, I haven't presented. She had a sales QBR, quarterly business review, and she's like, I haven't presented since college. Like, she's freaking out, like that state. That's your sympathetic. That's your middle rung of this polyvagal ladder, right? Or when your friend texts you, we got to talk, or your partner says, you're in sympathetic mobilization because you're activated. And then the last rung.
There's nothing worse than that text message. My heart's racing. It's not even happening.
Right? Literally. Exactly.
You're like, what is going on?
You can literally even just imagine a memory, right? Or you could hear someone say something, or a song comes on, and immediately you go into a sympathetic mobilization. That's the middle rung, right? Your heart rate increases. There's adrenaline, maybe some cortisol pumping. The bottom rung of that ladder, and then I'll kind of finalize into up-regulating, down-regulating, and what we can do to answer that question more directly, is where we go into this, what's called a dorsal vagal immobilization. In other words, shut down. So when you hear the stress responses like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, this is usually where your freeze system is kicking in, because your body goes into a shutdown, and your shutdown response gets activated when that threat overwhelms your system. And this happens because our bodies are perceiving that whatever threat this is, it's inescapable. And so our body goes into this freeze or shut down, which can lead into that collapse, that feeling of disconnect, that helplessness, that hopelessness, literally physically shutting down and emotionally withdrawing. And so what I think is fascinating is that if you've ever been in that state where you have been in, this one's coming up recently, in terms of holidays, you go into a situation with a holiday party, and all of a sudden you're that family member that you've had horrible interactions with, and you just feel helpless being around because they're just such a your body just freezes when they ask you a stupid question, and you just feel shut down, and you afterwards, family gatherings, you're just exhausted. It's because you're going into a dorsal vagal collapse or dorsal vagal immobilization. And that's why the holiday seasons can be so difficult for so many people, because you're not in a ventral vagal green state, baby. You're in a yellow sympathetic immobilization or activation, and likely going into a dorsal vagal immobilization or shutdown, the red state, right? So how do you go up or down the ladder? That is the question that Bianca asked. So now that we understand the ladder, we need to understand, where are you at this current moment? Because I could share different regulation, which is essentially climbing up to a better state. So say, for example, you're in a dorsal vagal immobilization. Up regulating is not going to take you from a dorsal vagal collapse to a green state immediately, because the primary centrality, one of the core concepts of polyvagal theory, is that there is a hierarchy of your system, right? You can't just jump from one state of the ladder to the next. It is up-regulating from one rung of the ladder to the next rung of the ladder to the next rung of the ladder. And so, and so one of the biggest things that I find is really helpful for anyone, whether you're in a sympathetic activation or a dorsal vagal immobilization shutdown, co-regulation is one of the quickest ways for most people with a safe other person to start to upregulate. So let's say, for example, you have a really tough time, right? I'll go back to that client where she's like, Emilia, I haven't done a presentation in forever. And what literally was happening is she's going into a sympathetic nervous system and she's getting mobilized. And because she literally talked to me, she's going up the ladder and letting her system feel a sense of calmness because her central nervous system is borrowing from mine through co-regulation, which is essentially a safe and reliable social connection, allows your nervous system to borrow from their autonomic nervous system to yours. So I'm going to
mirror neurons.
Yeah, I'm going to stop there because at the end of the day, we can go deep into the nuances. But that's why when you are stressed, calling a friend, calling someone that's a safe other, not someone that's going to send you down the ladder, is one of the most straight, helpful ways to upregulate.
This is also why it's said that when you start doing therapy, things kind of get worse before it gets better. Most people are in a shutdown. They're running from their problems. They're avoiding their pain. They're not actually dealing with it. And then once the cat's out of the bag, your body is in fight or flight. Like, what the hell do I do with all of this? And the more regulated you get over time, because you have a good therapist or coach who can help you navigate these challenges, the more you'll be able to climb the vagal ladder and get to a more calm, safe, stable, regulated space, which is known as ventral vagal. This is why doing therapy with a good therapist or a good trauma-informed coach is so unbelievably critical. The grand majority of us do not have safe people in our lives who can help us feel grounded, regulated, and safe. And so even just for that stance, like just having somebody who has a calm nervous system where you're sitting in their presence and you just you feel your body relax. It's like, oh my God, I haven't had that. I've never had that. That alone can be life-changing. So polyvagal theory. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to name what Bianca just did there. She just downshifted all of us. So if you were listening to this and you felt a micro shift in your nervous system when she breathed, your nervous system exhaled, that's down regulation. So deep, slow breath, something just like that, that's down regulation technique in real time.
Yeah. This is critical. And I know we did a kind of like a high level debrief of this, and you're probably going to walk away like with your head in a tizzy a little bit because this is a lot of information, but this is super critical to dip your toe into this. And if this is something that you're interested in learning more about, reach out to us. We help people with this every single day, and we could help you navigate through this too. The better your nervous system is, the better your life is. It is that simple. A calm, regulated nervous system enables and allows for a happy, healthy life.
Facts on facts on facts. And that is why it is one of the most powerful keys to well-being. So as you go away from this episode and you say, okay, what are some of my biggest takeaways? What can I actually apply? And what's the practical, tactical takeaway for me? If you want to use this key to unlock greater well-being on your day-to-day, literally right after this, or you can pause this, finish this practice out, and go about your day. Number one, the goal is at all times to make sure that you have a healthy nervous system so that you can have a greater sense of well-being and actual greater body metrics that help you have healthy, wealthy, in love states. So at any moment, you can ask yourself, what is the goal? Do I want to increase or decrease my energy? Do I want to increase or decrease the intensity of that energy? Or do I want to increase or decrease this emotion? At any single time when you answer that question, increase or decrease on the energy, the intensity, and the emotion, starting there, and then upregulating or downregulating as a result. A great upregulator or an upper for short, go ahead and dance, sing, move your body, do a shakeout. A downregulating technique is something like very small, just like the breath Bianca showed. You can do that. You can do an even more intense relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation, clenching your fists, counting to 5, and then slowly unfurling your hands. But something as small as that you can apply, and that helps you to increase your state awareness, your state attuneness, and ultimately your state change, which that increases your what's called vagal tone. So like Bianca said, if you want to dip your toe deeper into this research or actual application within your life to unlock those greater tools of well-being, we are here, we are available, and we are taking new clients. So please reach out. My episode suggestion in closing, actually, Bianca, you and I both had the same one.
Copycat.
Which just goes to show, it is what it is. Or 49, how to know if a relationship is safe. And if you've listened to this episode and you listen to that one, you'll now start to see polyvagal all over that.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you learned. We hope you learned a lot. And we'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.